Mr. Postman, delivered a letter to sooner to bed. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Boar Tavern. I'm Jonathan, your bartender. Just welcome. Come in, find a place, sit down in your usual spots to all our usual Blue Boar family members, loyal visitors. Good to have you. Pull up your own drinks. We've got something good for you tonight. Letters. That's what we're going to get into in a minute. Speaking of that, if you're not a member of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship, who is bringing you the Blue Boar, go look at our website, get sucked in, become a lifelong Oxfordian. It's like a drug. You get a little bit of it and then you want more and more until your whole life revolves around the Shakespeare authorship question. Look at our videos, articles, past issues of the newsletter. Hello, everyone. People from Canada we've got here, New Orleans, San Francisco, all across Germany. We've got Germany, New York, Australia. Very good. Welcome all. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves using your chat buttons there at your table. If you're watching later on YouTube, like and subscribe. This is a big important one, because our goal is that if somebody goes to YouTube and types in, say, Ben Jonson, what comes up is one of our videos telling people about the Oxfordian take on any of these subjects. So, yeah, we've got a show and tell sort of tonight. Like, remember back, here comes somebody. Remember when you were a kid and you had show and tell back in school and you'd stand in front of the blackboard and show something cool or your favorite Hot Wheels car or whatever. We're doing the equivalent tonight of our favorite Elizabethan letters. So we've all chosen something personal and we're going to talk about it. And so we're going to go all over the place tonight. Hello to Virginia. Hello to Australia. Hello to Phoebe and Bonner and Dorothea and Alex.
Hello, hello.
Welcome.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hi, I'm just telling everyone about how we're going to do a show and tell about letters tonight. And I guess we should talk about the importance of letters to the Elizabethans. In fact, under one of our YouTube videos recently, somebody had a great question because we were talking about letters so much. She said, how was mail delivered back then? There was no royal mail, so I'd like to hear that, and I know Dorothy has been thinking about it.
I can answer that question as best as I can.
Okay,
that's
and
two
also
ways.
just talk about the importance of letters.
Okay.
Back then to folks in the 1500s.
Obviously, no television, no internet, no telephone. So your communication is either in person or it is in written format, possibly in code, if you want to defer others from seeing what you've written. Letters were prescribed to be certain sizes and given particular folds. Love letters, for example, were accordion folded and then wrapped with silken red thread and tied very tightly. Diplomatic correspondence would be folded differently so that it was sealed very hard. So you could kind of tell what the content of a letter was from the way it was wrapped. And these silken cords that bind it and then the sealing wax that goes on top of it is the equivalent of keeping prying eyes out. But as to how they were delivered, there are two ways. One, if you happen to know someone who was going somewhere, you could say, please take this letter. Or you could say, if you're writing so and so, would you enclose this inside your letter? And so then they would put your letter inside of theirs and wrap it and seal it. Private messengers, kind of, like today, FedEx, maybe, being the equivalent, could get onto horses and go from post to post to post. Does that sound familiar? The Post. With London as its center, there were post horses and posts that took mail on a regular basis out along spokes of the wheel throughout England. So, for example, you were writing somebody in Dover from London, the post would start in London with a messenger on a horse who would ride to the next town, which might be roaster, and then he would put on the back of it, somebody who could write would put on the back of it that had been received there. Then that letter would be pooled with other letters, and he would take that packet to the next post that might be Canterbury, and somebody would write on the back of it, received at Canterbury, and then those letters would be given to another messenger. It even happened on ships, which was even trickier. If you were trying to get a message at war out to Lord Effingham, who is admiral in chief of what's going on in the fleet during the Armada, you could actually have people take them from boat to boat to boat to get to him and hand them to him. So very slow. Took 5 days at a minimum between Paris and London. That's how it was done.
Cool. I always thought it'd be cool to have a job delivering mail. Like, you know what I mean? Because you get to be outside. It's not too dangerous. You kind of get to like see the sights. I don't know. I always thought that'd be cool.
Well, it just occurs to me this is even plays into some of the Shakespeare plays like Romeo and Juliet, where messages aren't getting to the right place in time, so people don't know something happened, so they rush off to take the wrong action, and it ends in tragedy.
Post haste, I think, is a cool.
Post haste. And as a matter of fact, there's a wonderful letter where Burleigh writes on the back of it in his tiny little handwriting, post haste, 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 haste. And actually, some of the lines were run by the government. So, I mean, certainly for those types of government important messages, those messengers were on the staff. So
do you know what message she said was post haste, 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 haste?
I don't remember. I could look it up, but this was an impromptu question I wasn't expecting, so I didn't prep for it. But
wow,
okay.
I would love to
somebody
know.
has our old pal Tom, who used to sit here with us before he outgrew it. No, I'm kidding. We love you. I miss Tom. He asked, how are people paid for doing this?
Well, you tip the guy who brings you the letter. That's, one
Basically
answer.
tip.
But also there are people on the government payroll for the government stuff. But I suspect both the sender and the recipient, I would expect paid for it.
Up until the
Yeah,
19th century, up until postage stamps in the 19th century, it was the recipient's responsibility to pay,
Huh.
usually.
Interesting.
Huh.
Well, so speaking of letters, should we dive into our favorite
Let's do it. And
letters?
Bonner has a presentation, so we're going to try to keep it a conversation back and forth. And again, people ask you questions and things, and we'll try to get to some. But Bonner actually has some things to show us. So why don't you start, Bonner?
Here. Okay, did it show up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, I'm going to begin by introducing some of you. If you've been around, you may know about this book. It's hard to find. It's become a pretty rare book. When I checked today, there was only one available on the used bookstore, and it cost $225 plus shipping. So it's a pretty important book. It's Shakespeare Revealed in Oxford's Letters by William Plummer Fowler. And let's see how will this work to get okay, well, how is it not? How do I get it to the next
Slideshow.
Down arrow.
Go to slideshow.
Slideshow? Well, let's see. I'm not getting it. Okay. Well, I don't know what I did, but there it is.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is your chosen letter.
Yes, this is my chosen letter. This is one of the 810 letters that I'll give some credit to my mom because I'm supposed to, that she found in the Ellesmere collection at the Huntington Library. In the Ellesmere collection, there are thousands and thousands of documents, letters, all kinds of documents, materials, books. And these particular letters, I believe, were cataloged as tin mining Cornwall. And after many years of studying there and getting to know everybody and winning their respect, which was kind of hard to do because they weren't really all keen on Oxfordians, but she eventually was able to do some research in the Ellesmere collection, and she found 8 letters that are Oxford's. This particular letter, and then she let Mr. Fowler, who I believe lived in Connecticut or some New England, I'm not sure exactly.
New Hampshire.
Oh, thank you. You do. Okay, great. And they worked on the transcriptions, and they did two sets. One is in Oxford spelling, which is his original and sort of idiosyncratic spelling, and then they did a set in modernized spelling. And so I have the whole set. I've got there, of course, the copy that she had made at the Huntington. And this particular letter is so interesting because all the other letters, he's trying to get information to the Queen, and he refers to her as Her Majesty, Her Majesty. This letter he means to go directly to the Queen because he refers to her as Your Majesty. Let's see, where are we here? Okay. He directed the letter to Thomas Egerton, and about this time of this letter's thought to have been one of his latest ones on his beseeching the Queen for the tin mining monopoly, which she did not give him. But he directed it to Lord Egerton, as he had apparently just become the Lord Keeper of the Great Seal, which means he had a lot of contact with the Queen and he had her ear. And he seems to have thought that Thomas Egerton would be an advocate for him with the Queen, and help him to obtain the monopoly of tin. But of course, he was very disappointed. That didn't work out. But this particular letter is so interesting for several reasons. Many of the letters are 3 or 4 pages, so its length is not all. It's a little on the long side. But this is page 1. This is page 2. This is page 3, and this is page 4. And I only noticed today as I was rereading it, it ends and went and compared it with the other 7. They're not all my letters. Some of them are, one of them's a memorandum, but the other letters don't end as abruptly as this. Some of them he has a little sign off, your lordships to command, and he assigns his name. He doesn't on all of them. But this one ends so abruptly, I just have an eerie feeling that there was another page to this letter that we don't have. But
Yeah,
that's
there's
just,
no signature, is there, Bonner?
there's no signature on this one.
Yeah.
No. It's undated and there's no signature. But they believe that the letter comes from 1598 because it's obvious, because he refers within the body of the letter to things that were happening in 1597 and 1596. So clearly it's one of the last letters. Now, it's a very business-like letter. It is filled with, they like to say that Edward de Vere didn't have any business sense and he just was, I mean, he has spent a lot of time learning about tin and tin mining and what you do with tin. The big money, as he points out to the Queen, is made by the merchants who transport and sell the commodity to Turkey. That they made way more money, and he gives the Queen all the stats from it they make it into bars and they do it by pounds, and I mean this letter is filled with incredible information about this process. But he also is telling the Queen that a lot of wheeling and dealing is going on behind her back, which is hardly a surprise. And he has a lot to say that is not very complimentary of the wardens and the master who manages the tin mining process themselves. The pewterers are really the middlemen who get their hands in the till big time. They're making a lot of money that the Queen doesn't know they're making. And then the merchants who manage the actual transportation and the trade within the realm, as he calls it, but they make much more money when they get it over to Turkey because the poor Turks don't know what to pay for it. So they just really gouge them over there, but they do well. He has to let you know what his angle. It's a good one. It's good psychology with the Queen. He tells her, which your Majesty, with great facility, may put into your own coffers. He's trying to tell her this is going on, and she could have this money if she were to make some changes about things. So then this is a particularly interesting paragraph where he says, let's see where it starts, but where the serpent lay hid in the herb, they, and he's speaking of the pewterers this time, never thought should be perceived. They didn't think they'd get caught. For wherever they pretend it should nourish 3,000 poor people that support 3,000 workers, which hereby should be set a work, I can assure your Majesty, it is but, and your Majesty, it is but the work of 60 persons, which the company uses in several places. Scores 20 people. So basically, the Queen's been told that you've got 3,000 people involved, there's 60. He's spilling the beans.
Crazy.
And
I mean, there's fraud in Elizabethan England. I'm shocked, Bonner.
yeah. Well, the shocking thing is he's the one that's illuminating the Queen to this. Yeah. And then he ends with, And as for the detriment, here's the word detriment, and as for the detriment which it importeth to your majesty's concerns, your whole profit, which is to redound unto you by this community, mainly, and by the way, redound was a rather unusual word, and we use it a lot these days. And then when I was first doing my work on these 10 letters, which I gave at a conference, and I've had a lot of views of it. It's posted on our internet. Uh, it was like shooting fish in a barrel to go through these letters and find, and then just use the Shakespeare concordance on the internet and just one after another. All of these letters and phrases are just full of matches between what the words and the vocabulary, the phrases, and the Shakespeare plays, which you can do. But one that was interesting is Set a Work. I looked that one up, and that appears in only 2 plays, in Hamlet and in King Lear, in exactly set a work, in exactly this
Yeah.
context. But that's all over the place. Uh, like I said, it is remarkable how much and Fowler caught a lot of them too. But I'm happy to say I found a few more that Fowler missed, because even in these earlier letters, is because I was going, because he was having to work with a real concordance, and you only see the sentence that the word is in, and you don't get what's in front of it and behind it. But it's so nice when you have the online concordance; they'll give you whole paragraphs and sometimes big chunks, so you can really get the context well. But at any rate, his book is still a masterpiece, um, for all kinds of things. Let's see. Something I want your opinion on, because many of you have read there are a lot of letters, and we get bits and pieces of them in biographies of Queen Elizabeth and her letters from Christopher Hatton and Sir Walter Raleigh. And it seems to me, though you may find some others that don't do this one, most of the people who address her, they're very cautious, they're very subservient. In fact, they're downright obsequious, because they're begging for something. They want a job, they want a preferment, they want to get somebody out of prison. And so they're really being very careful and cautious in how they approach the Queen, even through someone else as an intermediary. But in this letter, what really just gets to me, it's well nigh the tone is amazing. It's almost ferocious. And I'll just read you one of which starts, where does it start? It starts right about here. Whereby, hereafter, when your majesty, may be certainly informed. That means when she gets all of the information that she thinks is true, certainly informed how great a commodity you may make it unto you, then it will be too late, having barred and excluded yourself by this your grant to the pewterers, to make any profit thereof. And then he softens it right here. This is my pointer show. If so, you should be disposed. He cut after he's just been just I want to say socking it to her. He's just telling it like it is, and he's not really holding anything back. So this, I think, is the end, but I will end on this, and I will be interested to know if letters are coming and going, if you find anything that is quite as tough as he is with the Queen in this letter.
So what are the reasons that you chose the 10 letters to bring up today? What about them just strikes a chord in your honor that
Well, for one thing, I don't know that people are really aware that we have a letter, and there's also one in the Burghley papers where he was addressing to Lord Burghley to want to be his advocate with the Queen. In this case, he's reaching out to Thomas Egerton, and I don't think Egerton served him well, because the letters were in the Egerton, known as the Ellesmere collection, so they stayed there. But this is a communication between the person that we believe is Shakespeare and the Queen. And my God, would the Stratfordians be going berserk with glee if they had anything close to something like this?
I think maybe Egerton did him more of a favor than we realized. If they're preserved in the Ellesmere collection, and then your parents like found them in the archives, I think I think he did right by him.
That's a good point. I mean, it's also who knows, but maybe he had someone copy the letter, kept the original, sent the copy. Who knows, right? Secretary.
This is clearly, I think that this has been well identified as holographic of Oxford, this letter.
Right. But what I'm saying is Egerton could have had one of his own secretaries copy and send it, or maybe he never sent it.
Yeah. I know one thing
yeah, that's true. He could have sent a
Go ahead.
copy and kept the original himself. I
Yeah.
see what you're saying. That's possible. And so
What-
that's why we have it. Or
One
he
thing
could
you-
have just, because he was
Yes,
well,
but
keeping the
Phoebe's
Great Seal, communicating pretty regularly with the Queen, he could have divulged the contents of it. Or maybe,
there's
we don't know for sure, but
one
that's
thing
where
you
it
often
was.
hear from Stratfordians is these are derided, like, oh yes, he was so poetic, he was writing all these letters about tin, and they're ignoring all his other letters about art and writing and things like that. But even it sounds like the tin letters, if you really look at them, have a case for him being Shakespeare.
Oh my gosh, the serpent
It's a
in the
powerful
urn.
case.
That was wild.
Mm.
And
Yes.
somebody asked a question here: did Fowler ever complete his study of the parallels with the Shakespeare canon and the tin letters?
No, he never did the 10 letters. He did the first, and I'm blanking out now. I think there were 77 letters or communication. Some of them are classified as memorandum, but basically there's 77 of them. And I believe he did the first 45. Mother called to his attention these letters that she had found, and she also had a researcher that she paid in England to go through the PRO, record office, public record office there, which is now I think part of Kew for the National Archives. But this person located 6 letters that of Oxford's, also on 10 that I believe were not known to Ward at the time. This is more and more material that's coming out, and Fowler did not know about those 6 letters. So I have they worked together on all the 14 total letters that they worked together on to transcribe. And it's nice to have them transcribed, even though Oxford's handwriting is relatively readable. It's not secretary hand, it is a form of italics. But and it's nice, and I enjoy looking at it. My eye has adapted to it a little bit after working on it for a few years.
The people who've looked at tons of letters and things, can you tell did he have distinctive handwriting of this sort, or could that have been like?
I mean, even Alan Nelson said he had good handwriting, right? In Monstrous Adversary, that was like the one nice thing he said about him. He says the exercises with his pen in his like daily school schedule that Cecil made for him. He's like, well, I guess he did the letters with his pen because he actually has really good handwriting. Bonner, did your mom ever suspect? I'm so interested in the Huntington. I was there recently, and it's funny, when I went there earlier in the summer, they knew about Ginger Renner, the librarian, and that she'd been an Oxfordian, kind of the inside of the Huntington. Did your mom suspect that there were more letters, that if she'd had more time to look through the Huntington archives in the Ellesmere collection, there might be more stuff with Oxford that she hadn't gotten to yet?
I think we all think that
Right?
there's been archives out there that have never been looked at and never been cataloged. And I have this instinct. I've actually had the conversation with Mom, but other people have this instinct that there's stuff out there that are yet to be found, and we do need to continue our efforts to research and look for things.
There's a huge repository of unread, uncatalogued letters at the Folger Library, DC. I mean,
Really?
shelves and shelves and shelves of them, which is one of the reasons that the Folger runs that paleography class that it runs, hoping that people will come and volunteer. And you can volunteer online. I mean, you don't actually have to go there, but there's like a repository, and you can pull up letters that they send to you and do your best to work on them and make transcriptions of them.
That's cool. Have you done that?
I have. I've taken the course, and for a while I was doing some letters, but I've got other stuff to do now than help the Folger.
So it's an
Piles of
actual
letters.
class and training people to read this kind of
Oh yeah, I
handwriting?
mean, and it's quite a skill. Actually, I'm sure that there are several Oxfordians who, besides myself, who can read it, secretary hand as well as the italic hand. But reading the secretary hand takes some work. I mean, several weeks of work to read it. But yeah, you can volunteer and keep your hand in it, so to speak.
I was taking a paleography class in LA like a couple weeks ago, and that's when we went on a field trip to the Huntington.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. How about Dorothea? Do you want to jump in there?
Oh, you want me to go next? Okay. So was a hard choice for me. So many letters, so many favorite letters, but I chose a relatively short one so that I could give you more of an explanation of its context and why I chose it. It is a letter written either December or November 7th, 1574. The month is illegible. From Sir Thomas Smith to Mildred Cecil in response to a lost letter from Mildred. Smith is a longtime friend of the Cecil family. He was a scholar, he was a diplomat, and also Edward de Vere, Earl of Oxford, spent time as a child learning and studying in Smith's home. And so they were also very close friends. So Smith is close friends with the Cecils and he is close friends with Oxford. I chose it as a favorite letter for a couple of reasons. It is one of the most emotionally packed letters I have ever read. It shows Mildred completely, utterly furious. And Smith, who is, again, a diplomat and a very smart man, torn between his loyalties to Oxford and his loyalties to the Cecils, and trying very hard to come up with excuses for what he has done. And what he has done is to send through Oxford for Anne Cecil, Oxford's wife, an elixir, which they call a water, a distillation, which contains two abortifacients. And we can sort of read between the lines, which we will in a few minutes, that this was a secret that no one was supposed to know. Somehow Anne's mother found out about it. We know some moms who would find out that what their daughters were drinking, particularly if their daughters were 18 years old, had been married for 3 years without producing an heir or any child or any pregnancy for their husbands, since that was Anne Cecil's only job, was to deliver children to her husband. As a noblewoman, she has no other job, and she's vomiting a lot. Now, there are a lot of reasons that you could be vomiting in Elizabethan England. You might, for example, have the flu. You might have eaten something that was really kind of putrid and didn't agree with you, and plenty of other reasons. But when a woman of childbearing age is throwing up, most people say, "Are you pregnant?" Some of you who have not either experienced it or lived with somebody who's experienced it, but what we call morning sickness, vomiting due to pregnancy, can be very mild, or it can strike people day one and they are ill for 9 months until they deliver that kid, and it can be very violent. So, in the context of this letter, at about the time it was written, at almost exactly the same time, two unusual things happened. One, Oxford is planning to go overseas for the Queen to Paris and France and then on to Venice, and he writes his will. He writes his will, leaving everything to his sister should he pass away while he is gone. Anne, of course, would get her dower, so it's not unusual that he left nothing to her, but he also leaves nothing to this child who he knows his wife is pregnant with because he has asked for the abortifacient and given it to her from his friend Thomas Smith. And I would think it would be normal for a man with an estate like Oxford's and a title to, even if he didn't know his wife was pregnant, to say, "and my heirs of my body," as, in case she is pregnant and I don't know. But he doesn't say that. And the second thing that happens at almost exactly the same time is that Oxford makes his statement in court, in the presence chamber, openly to the Queen and everyone else there, that if Anne were with child, it wasn't his. Okay, so this is the lead up to the letter. Then there's the letter, which we'll read last, because I want to tell you what happens after Oxford leaves, almost exactly a month later. Dr. Richard Masters is, I would guess, kind of doctor to the Cecil family, good friend with Burleigh, and Burleigh sends him to court while Anne is in her 5th month of pregnancy, calculated backwards from the date of delivery of the child, to tell the Queen that Anne is pregnant. This is a really odd thing because, you see, Burleigh sees the Queen every day. And this is wonderful news. He is a grandfather. Finally, this union between Oxford and his daughter is producing a child. This is wonderful news. Why isn't Burleigh telling her personally? And why is he sending a doctor? Well, Masters tells us that Burleigh's plan to send Masters instead of himself has gone over very well, that the concealing of it any longer would have been a problem if Burleigh had not considered it a piece of duty to tell the Queen and come forward himself. But Burleigh didn't come forward himself. He sent Masters, which is why Masters is writing Burleigh, telling Burleigh what happened when Masters told the Queen. What happened? The Queen sprang from her cushions in surprise. She couldn't believe it. Masters happens to have a very odd thing in his pocket. He happens to have Anne Cecil's private records of her menstrual cycles. Now, where Masters got Anne Cecil's private records of her menstrual cycles can only seem to lead from Masters to her father, from her father to her mother, and from her mother extricated from Anne. But he actually shows these to the Queen, which I find a bizarre thing to do for a married woman. And then, because Masters is really a bit of a dolt, he reveals that Anne asked him for a second abortifacient. And he says, my lady being here at Shrovetide, which was February 14th in 1575, had asked me to prepare some medicines ad mensans promotionis, which is for the promotion of menstrual bleeding or an abortifacient. I counseled her to stay a while. He also describes that Anne was much fallen and thin with little color, and that when she was comforted and counseled to rejoice, she would cry and say, alas, alas, how should I rejoice, seeing that he who should rejoice with me, namely her husband Oxford, is not here, he's in France, and to say the truth, I stand in doubt whether he pass upon me and it, meaning her pregnancy or her unborn child, or not. In other words, Anne is very nervous that Oxford is not happy about this. So with that as the context before and after, let me read you the letter that Thomas wrote, because at some points it's heartbreaking. At other points, it's actually a little funny as he tries to scramble with excuses that are really not going to fly to a very smart woman, Mildred Cecil. Madam, I sent you yesterday of my water to my lord for my lady of Oxford. That's how we know the bottle of elixir went to Oxford, who clearly asked for it, for Anne. Methinks there's some doubt made of it. In other words, I think I'm in a lot of trouble. If it please God that she have so much the natural heat in her as may join with it, I doubt not your ladyship shall have great comfort of it, and she much help. Now, this is Renaissance medicine. There are the four humors. We know she was at 98.6, but to Thomas Smith at the time, there's this concept that if there's enough heat in the body, it will meld with the elixir, and that will cause wonderful things to happen. That's what he's saying. There is nothing in it but such as daily eaten and drunken. Yes, drunken, not drink it, drunken. In other words, it's organic. No purgation, no spew. It's not going to give her the runs, and it's not going to make her throw up. We're trying to keep her from throwing up. And it has such virtue in it that next to God, I owe my health to it, and so many as hath once used it have given me thanks and do repute it a singular thing. This stuff is wonderful, Mildred. Don't worry. It doth but help nature, not constrain it. If it be vomited out, any heat being in the body, it cannot be vomited out before the chief virtue of it be dispersed. In other words, she swallows it and she spits it right out. Don't worry, Mildred, it did its job. For the fennel and angelica water can be vomited out. There's the clue. Fennel and angelica water are both well-known abortifacients for this area, and this is undoubtedly what Mildred seized on. Thomas Smith gave her daughter a water containing abortifacients. Why in the world would you do that when all Mildred has been praying for is that Anne will become pregnant with Oxford's heir? All right. If her ladyship do not find immediate comfort in it, then nature is too feeble. In other words, if this doesn't work, I don't know what to do for her. And then the tone of the letter changes. I can say no more. That's the first indication that Smith is saying, I'm torn between two loyalties here, and I've been sworn to secrecy, and I cannot tell you anymore. I can say no more. But I would be as sorry that my Lady of Oxford should miscarry as if she were 5 times my daughter. That word miscarry, when we hear it with the number 1 definition, which is unwanted termination or early termination of a pregnancy that causes the death of the fetus. There has been some arguments that the word miscarry is actually meant in its secondary definition, which is, oh, things miscarried. They didn't work out right. But we'll see by the end of this letter that Smith means the first definition, which is the miscarriage of a child with which she is pregnant. I would be as sorry if my Lady of Oxford should miscarry as if she were 5 times my daughter for divers reasons, different reasons, and would be glad to do as good as any living next to your ladyship. And those 2 waters, were they not in it to temper it? So now he starts to quibble. Now he's like, she's going to want to know why I did this. Oh, I put them in to temper it. I durst say she should not vomit it out, given but a spoonful, if life were in the body, for it should disperse straight and comfort immediately the vital spirits. That phrase, if life were in the body, is a really interesting phrase because, of course, Anne's life is in her body because Anne Cecil is not dead. Therefore, the phrase, if life were in the body, can only refer to a second life inside Anne's body, and that is the unborn child. Let it be given alone and by a spoonful at a time till she herself shall require more. Pardon my foolishness, madam. Period. Boy, there's the apology. There's Smith saying, I really got in the middle of this and I'm apologizing, Mildred. It is my goodwill deserved of my lord, that's Oxford, and you, and the love I bear to my Lady of Oxford, which caused me to write these, and so commend you to God from Hampton Court. So it hits on all of these emotions between these people. I feel like you can really see Mildred's character, even though she didn't write this letter. Certainly you can see Thomas Smith's, and in the context of what was going on. To me, this letter is wonderful because it explains that Oxford at 23 was faced with a horrible problem, which is the wife he had never slept with was pregnant by somebody else, and he's leaving for the continent. And if she is really pregnant, which she was, he could end up with another man's child taking the title of the Earl of Oxford. And even if it's a girl, in this culture, I mean, I think even today, any man who found that out would be incredibly distressed and angry and feel dishonored. But to somebody in this time, and particularly someone who is an earl, it is a major dishonor. And so on my campaign to discredit Alan Nelson's discredit of Oxford in Monstrous Adversary, I offer up this letter from Thomas Smith.
Wow. Yeah, it seems very raw. That's a word that comes to me. It's not, a lot of things are covered up with fancy writing and things like that, but this seems pretty nitty.
You get the emotion in it?
Yeah,
I think so. He was a good guy, Thomas Smith, tried to do his best by everybody. But what's interesting to me, too, I would like to say, the fact that he put the abortifacients in the elixir, knowing the situation with Oxford, meant that he's a very rational man. I mean, he's not some quack on the corner apothecary. He also thought there was a good reason for terminating this pregnancy. And I think that's a really important point to make.
And of course, we can tie this into the Shakespeare theme of husbands thinking their wives were having illegitimate children. So,
yep. And also, just one more comment, which is, I think also Oxford at this time wasn't sure whether Anne had actually cheated on him or whether she had been raped. I think that's behind it, what the motivation, how this happened. But by law, women were considered victims of rapes unless they got pregnant because Elizabethan law determined that a woman could only get pregnant if she wanted the sex. So legally, and a whore, not a victim. That doesn't mean Oxford thought that, but you can see where the question might be.
You're getting some murmurs among our crowd here, Dorothea, saying, wow, tour de force, Dorothea. Wow. So, wow. I'm thinking, can we move on to Alex? Because there's a question here that I think will tie into yours, if I can ask that first. And then maybe I can leap in and we'll save your controversial one for last.
Sure.
Phoebe?
Mine's
Okay.
more fun, less
Okay, yeah, fun controversial. Alex, somebody had asked here, are there any collections of letters from people of Stratford-on-Avon that should be revealing if Will is who they claim? Is he ever mentioned in letters?
The short answer to the question is yes, he is mentioned in letters from people who are from Stratford-on-Avon, but as far as I can tell, not in any literary context.
They were all business and legal context, were they not?
Yes,
Business in
basically.
terms of doing business and legal in terms of lawsuits. Is that right, Alex?
Yeah, yeah. So I wanted to focus on the one letter that was addressed to Mr. William Shakespeare. I
So
think
this is the total of his correspondence that is known.
the total of his known correspondence. Most people are probably familiar with it, but I found it interesting, and also it has its own set of unanswered questions, at least to me. Maybe some of the people who are participating can help shed some light on it. The letter is from a man named Richard Quiny, who lived in Stratford-on-Avon. He is believed to be Richard Quiny, who's the father of Thomas Quiny, who later married Judith Shakespeare, one of Shakespeare's two daughters. The letter is dated October 25th, 1598. And it was discovered in 1793 by Edmund Malone in Stratford-on-Avon after Malone had searched 3,000 papers in the corporate archives.
Wow.
Unfolded, it's about 6.5 by 5.5 inches. It was folded as a packet to be sent. So it actually, when it was discovered, it was in a 3 by 2 inch packet. Traces of Quiny's seal were still visible on the packet, and it's not known if it was ever received because the letter was found with Quiny's stuff back in Stratford later on. As I said, it was discovered in the fall of 1793, which would be almost 200 years after it was written, and it was first printed in 1821. Quiny was in London at the time. His mission there was business. He was sent to London to petition the Privy Council for a new corporation charter on better terms than the one that Stratford currently had, and he wanted some relief from the latest subsidy that had been passed by Parliament. And Quiny appears to have been running short on money. So it's only a couple hundred words. Let me just read the letter in modern spelling. Loving country, addressed to Mr. Shakespeare. By the way, it is Shakespeare, Shackspere. A couple of those letters may be missing, but it's definitely Shakespeare, not Shakespeare. The text, loving countrymen, I'm bold of you as a friend, craving your help, with 30 pounds upon Mr. Bushels and my security, or Mr. Mittens with me. Mr. Roswell has not come to London as yet, and I have special cause. You shall friend me much in helping me out of all the debts I owe in London, I thank God, and much quiet my mind, which would not be indebted. I am now toward the court in hope of answer for the dispatch of my business, the business that I just explained to get a better charter for the city. You shall neither lose credit nor money by me, the Lord willing, and now but persuade yourself so as I hope, and you shall not need to fear, but with all hearty thankfulness I will hold my time and content your friend, and if we bargain farther, you shall be paymaster yourself. My time bids me hasten to an end, and so I commit this to your care and hope of your help. I fear I shall not be back this night from the court. Haste, We've heard that word haste before. Haste, the Lord be with you and with us all. Amen. From the Bell in Carter Lane, the 25 October 1598. Yours in all kindness, Richard Quiny. Endorsed to my loving good friend and countryman, Mr. W. Shakespeare. That is the text of the letter itself. What I found interesting, there's some great notes that Nina Green had. First of all, he's not asking directly for Shakespeare to loan him $30, 30 pounds, excuse me. He's asking Shakespeare to see if he can arrange a loan for that amount of money. And then he goes on because he says, I will hold my time and content your friend, which Nina Green interprets meaning I will pay the loan when it's due to the person that you select who's going to be the actual lender. And then he goes on to say, if we bargain farther, you shall be the paymaster yourself, which might anticipate a further personal loan afterward. So there's really possibly two different financial transactions involved in the context of this. By way of explanation, a couple of the people he mentions, Mitten and Roswell, were gentlemen in the service of Sir Edward Greville, Lord of the Manor of Stratford. Greville had promised money, but Roswell, who was his messenger, had not arrived yet in London, which is why Richard Quiny was looking for an interim loan. So one of my questions is, where is Shakespeare at this time? Because if Shakespeare is back in Stratford, as Dorothea explained, it'd take several days for this letter, even if it was ever transmitted, which we don't believe it was, but if it were, it would take several days for it to go back and forth. So if Quiny needs money right away, how can Shakespeare help him if Shakespeare is in Stratford? It's possible that Shakespeare is closer to home, closer to London, I should say, but we just don't know that unless somebody else has some information about exactly where Shakespeare was in October of 1598. The other thing that's quite interesting, of course, is that, as we said, this is the only known letter addressed to William Shakespeare. There are others, as Dorothy asked, there are a couple of other letters from people in connection with loaning that say, I believe Shakespeare may be able to loan some funds, around this time, but they're kind of vague. And then most interesting to me is to compare this, the only known letter addressed to William Shakespeare, with Diana Price's chart in her well-known book, Shakespeare's Unauthorized Biography, where she has that list of 24 other authors, and the other evidence of them being writers or correspondents, other than having their name on a book. Of the 24 other writers that she mentions in her chart, 18 of them have, quote, a record of correspondence, especially concerning literary matters, and or, quote, handwritten inscriptions, receipts, letters, etc., touching on literary matters. 18 out of 24. The other 6 that she does not have that information for are Robert Greene, interesting choice, Thomas Watson, Christopher Marlowe, of course, died young, Francis Beaumont, John Fletcher, and John Webster. Webster had a very short career. But considering the amount of effort that has been spent looking into finding any scrap of paper that has to do with Will Shakespeare of Stratford, and considering the length of his literary career, if indeed he were the author, it's amazing that this is the only thing that turns up. And as I said, we don't know if it was ever delivered because it was found with Quiny's stuff back in Stratford later on.
Alex, from the letter, is it your concept that Will of Stratford was a broker, a loan broker, I guess would be the modern use of it. Perhaps having some money of his own, occasionally put out at interest, but mostly that he just knew people who were interested in making money on money.
Yeah, and I think he could. I think the expectation was that maybe Shakespeare could recommend somebody, who and could vouch for the trustworthiness of Quiny and his friends. But as I said, who knows? It's possible that the messenger arrived the next day with the money, that was needed that from Greville, and that he didn't really need to send this letter at all.
He never
We
sent the letter.
just we just don't know. The other thing that I wanted to point out, it certainly seems to me from the text of the letter and the family connections that these two people knew each other. They were not writing stranger to stranger. The tone of the letter is certainly warm, and it sounds like they were well acquainted with each other, which is also I find very interesting.
Point of information, I read recently in a book that the town of Stratford had only 12 streets. 12 streets, 400 structures that housed
Oh.
about 2,000 people. So clearly, if they are all around about Stratford, they know and he's living by this time. When did he buy the new place, the biggest house? Though he wasn't living into it
1597.
later, but he certainly would have been. They would have known. Everybody would have known everybody, I would think.
Wasn't he cited for hoarding grain
In time of famine, yes.
spring of 1598? I think it was a few months earlier, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he was still in Stratford in the fall, unless somebody has definite information about that.
Just to let you all know, I think we're going to have to go a little over tonight
Yeah.
if you're all okay with that.
Goodbye, mate.
We're about 7 minutes away from our official closing time. But
You
You're
keep
not
the
gonna
drink
kick us
coming,
out.
Jonathan.
I'll
He's
keep it.
not going to kick us out, is what he's saying.
No, but is he going to keep making drinks? That's the question.
Self-serve over there. Go get your own. Shall I? I'll leap in with mine then, because I'm sort of jumping back to Bonner to one of Edward de Vere's letters,
Oh.
and I chose this one just because it's sentimental to me. It's the thing I read that back in 1991. I was on the fence, so I believed a lot of the Stratfordian baloney, but hadn't fully committed. And then that year must have been a good year in magazines, because first the Atlantic had a cover story, Tom Bethel, 1991, but also the National Review had this. I have the pages here. Joseph Sobran had a little thing on Oxford, and these two I read close together, and especially Joseph Sobran's. I thought, okay, this is all really good information. It's fairly convincing, but Joseph Sobran then included excerpts of Oxford's writing. And to me, it's a purely subjective thing. I can't put it forward as proof, but it clicked something in me. Just reading some of his phrases, and especially part of this letter. And it was like, holy, this feels like Shakespeare to me. And because I think this is the thing maybe actors know, that as even aside from the meaning of the words, different writers just feel differently in your mouth. Like different writers will have different rhythms, and they make your tongue and jaw and vocal cords do different things. So even aside from the words, the way they put the vowels and consonants together has a certain individual sort of fingerprint to it. So I was reading these, and especially this letter I'm going to read. I thought, I'd done some Shakespeare on stage, and I'm like, this feels like him, just in here, tongue, what these are doing. So, and I've even made a video of this if you want to go. In fact, I'll put a link to it there in the comments. Won a prize in the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship Video Contest. You can also look it up, called a Shakespeare Pop Quiz, where I tricked people by saying, let's see if you can identify what Shakespeare play this came from. And then I dressed up all Elizabethan, sat there by candlelight and recited this. So here it is. This is a letter that Edward de Vere wrote on the death of the Queen to his brother-in-law, basically. It goes, I cannot but find a great grief in myself to remember the mistress which we have lost. And although it hath pleased God after an earthly kingdom to take her up into a more permanent and heavenly state, wherein I do not doubt she is crowned with glory, to give us a prince wise, learned, and enriched in all virtues, yet for the long time which we spent in her service, we cannot look for so much left of our days as to bestow upon another. In this common shipwreck, mine is above the rest, who least regarded, though often comforted, of all her followers, she hath left to try my fortune among the alterations of time and chance, either without sail whereby to take the advantage of any prosperous gale, or anchor to ride until the storm be overpast. And you go, if you pop that into the mouth of any dissatisfied courtier in a Shakespeare play, nobody would bat an eye. And to me, talking about how things feel, Shakespeare always, to me, feels rounded and kind of rolling. He's easy to memorize, which sounds counterintuitive. Oh, it's Shakespeare. But if you really try to, are in a Shakespeare play, his lines are pretty easy to memorize for that quality of just being sort of rounded and flowing and rolling. And I was even comparing it to your letter, Dorothea, when you were reading from Thomas Smith. I was going, he sounds different.
Yeah.
Different writers are more angular, or they don't sound or feel like Shakespeare when you read them out loud. So that one, I put it in my video and said, it's a trick question. That's really Edward de Vere's letter. So, in a letter to an audience of one person, Edward de Vere is sounding like Shakespeare. Not just that, he's not just using a metaphor at all, the common shipwreck. He's then developing the metaphor and building on it. And again, this is just a private letter to his brother-in-law. So that's apparently how he thought. So that, for me, subjectively, is pushed me into the Oxfordian camp right there, that one letter.
Beautiful letter and beautiful reading, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you.
And actually wonderful information about how it feels in the mouth to recite.
It's something most people don't think of.
I've never thought of that. That's fabulous.
No, I think I actually, a couple weeks ago, I watched Bonner's presentation from a while ago at the SOF. That was, I think similarly about the Tim letters, and she had Michael Delahoyde come out at the end and sort of read one out loud. And I was like, it's like when you hear it spoken aloud, it feels so alive. Should I jump in and do mine?
Yeah,
go for it.
I was happy to go last because this is a little less Oxfordian, but it is
okay.
A little. All right. Well,
Okay.
so for me, I also found this in Nina Green's wonderful online, treasure trove of all these letters and documents. So this is a letter that was found in William Cecil's files, and it's signed by a Baptista de Trento, although no such person is known to exist. So it's thought that this is a pseudonym, and this is sort of a whistleblower anonymous letter. And it's relating to the kind of controversial, mysterious death of Amy Robsart, the Earl of Leicester's, Robert Dudley's wife, who's found with her neck broken at the bottom of the stairs. So this is the letter. Being moved, most serene majesty, by zeal for the honor of God and your person, and for the preservation of your kingdom and my country, not wishing to see so much bloodshed as will be spilled, with this letter I reveal to you a great crime, enormous and horrible, and deserving of every punishment, namely that the principal lords of this realm have made a conspiracy and plot against you to take from you your kingdom and perhaps your life. The plot is this. The Earl of Leicester was the inventor and chief head of this conspiracy. For having been raised to great heights by your majesty and exalted at court to the utmost degree a lord can reach, the thought entered his mind that he ought to have your majesty for his wife and be king of England. To obtain this desire, he had his wife killed, keeping her in the house of a man whom all know. She went to a wedding, and while she was away, the Earl of Leicester sent some of his henchmen, who killed her and pretended she had died a sudden death. She was buried quickly, but the local authorities, finding her death unusual and strange, had her exhumed and examined and found that she had no blemish, being beautiful in face and body, and her head well adorned with ornamental coverings. But when they were removed, her adornments, she found in her head 5 tarred nails, each 6 fingers long. The henchman had used the tar to keep the blood from flowing and to hide the wounds, because if the earl had poisoned her, as he easily could have done, the poison would have left marks on her face and body which would have been recognizable, and proceedings would have been brought against him. In this way, the 5 nails left no visible sign. The authorities, having found the nails, began proceedings and reported the matter, but the Earl of Leicester was pardoned by your majesty, who knew nothing of the affair, on the condition that the matter never be spoken of again, and so it was done. It goes on for more. So for me, I think, in my personal opinion, I'm like, well, that's all I need to know. Like, this is an open and shut case with the kind of, it's so obvious, the details. Everyone knows the motive. Everybody knows the Earl of, the Earl of Leicester had designs on the throne, wanted to marry Queen Elizabeth, wanted to get his wife out of the way, all kinds of gossip around that. But just the details of, like, they knew that if they'd poisoned her, which he would have easily done, she would have been blotchy and it would have raised suspicion. And so instead, they did this kind of ingenious thing where they put a bunch of nails and then they put pitch to stop the bleeding, and then they put a wig on it and thought they'd get away with it. And then the fact that even though they exhumed the body and people were suspicious of it, Queen Elizabeth was like, yeah, guys. And so it all got hushed up. So for me, I'm like, it just has the ring of truth, open and shut. And now I know how Amy Robsart died. Although I know that I'm perhaps, there's some other people who want to speak up in honor of defending Robert Dudley from suspicion. But to me, I was like, this tracks.
That's pretty lurid, that's for sure.
Well, in the book that I was reading about, it's a fairly good biography of the Earl of Leicester by Derek Wilson, who is a substantially good historian, I think. But apparently, what they did is what the person in that letter is making that up, because if she's been exhumed, she's going to now not be in really good shape. What they did is they brought in the coroner and a jury of 15 people the very next day. The Elizabethans left the body. When there's a homicide, they could not remove the body until they were looked at by a jury and the coroner. And the 15 men were there watching the coroner, and the coroner discovered that she had a broken neck and she had 2 injuries in her brain. One, what they call a half thumb, which is about half an inch. And this is described in that documentation is around. I was trying to look real quick to see what the source of it was, but this is what Wilson has in his biography. And then she had a second wound that was 2 inches deep, described as 2 thumbs. And these were 2, and this is inconsistent. I mean, if she fell, and I've also read that at Cumnor Place, where she was living, that the staircase was not very, we envisioned something from Gone with the Wind, Tower, where people are, this great big glorious staircase to fall down. It was a very short, I've seen sketches of what it would look like. I don't know that it was real or just what generally, because I think Cumnor Place is now long gone, but what the houses that are real. So a very short little staircase, because ceilings weren't very high. And so for her to have killed herself through suicide by throwing herself down, I don't know how she would have gotten those 2 injuries in her brain.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out. I'm trying to figure out what's consistent about falling down a set of stairs and having 2 holes, one, 2 thumbs deep. And I mean, unless they said she hit it on an andiron that was at the base of the stairs. I mean, that sounds to me almost like something metal would have had to have gone.
It would have had,
I mean, right? Does
and
anybody else find that fishy?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just odd.
Yeah.
And
it would be interesting to do the next step, and I will look for it. I couldn't find it at first blush, but to find out where where the report from the coroner is and the people who were there. But they were there within 24 hours usually. It also occurred when Christopher Marlowe died in the house of the widow Bull. The people, he's left there, his body, the homicide, and the people are gathered. I think it's pretty much the next day, and the coroner examines it because they don't release the body until it's been adjudicated by a jury and enough people. And they agree that to what they're seeing, what the coroner is declaring is the case, that she has a broken neck and these 2 wounds. But
so it all remains a big mystery, who done it, the great who done it.
Well, Leicester at the time was at Windsor Palace. and he was brought. I've read two different. One is that Christopher Blount, who was eventually going to marry Lettice Knollys, that Blount brought him the news, and then in this book it says somebody else. But the minute he knew the news, he knew he was going to be in deep trouble, because it was widely believed at the time, for a long time, that he had had his wife murdered so he could be cleared of her of her and marry the Queen. And interestingly, she had a half brother. Y'all know about John Appleyard? She had a half brother who kept bringing the case up and for years and years. And Lester kept paying him off, but he thought he had the leverage to keep bringing up this case. And eventually he was arrested, and it finally brought an end to it. But the case was
Sounds like he got
tried
lucky.
over and over again.
Yeah.
Oh, who's the author of the letter?
Yes.
Somebody asked. No, it's signed by this person, Baptista de Trento, but no one knows who that is. It's likely a fake Italian pseudonym for somebody who wants to be able to write this letter anonymously.
I guess we have to consider too, since letters were so important back then, lying in letters could have also been a big thing.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Don't believe
the internet.
Don't believe everything you read, right?
Yeah.
Even in Elizabethan letters.
Interesting.
Yeah, I see that somewhere.
Oh.
I read a theory that Cecil had Amy murdered in order to. Bonner had read about this, and we were discussing it. Which I don't want to. But to me, the idea, William Cecil was so horrified by the idea that Dudley would marry Queen Elizabeth. Like when it seems that it's maybe going to happen, he's freaking out and panicking. And so I don't think that William Cecil would have wanted, Robert Dudley single and on the market, is my feeling. I think he probably would have felt much more comfortable if he had a wife. So I don't think he would have been motivated to take her out, but who knows?
On the other hand, being married to Amy Robsart didn't exactly keep him from having an affair with the Queen and everybody else. So
no, but it probably kept him from being the king.
Kept him from marrying the Queen. That's true.
That's what he wanted. I mean, he was, he was very ambitious. So.
Well, what's so interesting about it is it happened under very suspicious circumstances. The servants of the house had all gone to a fair, so it happened the day, and it was well known that when they had these fairs, generally the lady of the house, the highfalutin people, didn't go to these fairs, but their servants did. We call them employees now. I hate that term, servants, but so she would be basically alone and pretty much vulnerable. And that's the day when this happened. So that circumstance doesn't look good. And then, of course, but the deal is once Lester had the news brought to him, he was horrified because he knew it was going to look bad for him. And the Queen immediately distanced herself from Lester. So it kind of cooled their whole situation, whatever it was.
And I see
it would have been very clever on the part.
Starting to have to get up and leave. It's our closing time. Bye, everyone who's having to leave early. Sorry, we went a little bit over. Any final words on letters? Anyone? I guess not. So those are our favorite letters from the Elizabethan time. And thanks for everyone for joining us, being with us here tonight. And see you next time, when we'll be talking about Will Shakespeare of Stratford and what is really known about him. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to our panel here. Bye-bye, everyone.